The next bill on the calendar for the day is House File 4240. The clerk will report the bill.
House File number 4240, an act relating to elections, making various changes related to election administration.
I recognize the author of the bill, the member from Hennepin, Representative Freiberg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill includes a series of election administration updates designed to improve efficiency, clarify procedures, and reduce unnecessary costs. The bill provides greater flexibility for cities administering absentee voting, standardizes the use of the statewide voter registration system across elections, and clarifies early voting procedures and record-keeping requirements. The proposal also removes outdated statutory language, including references to color ballots and a duplicative list related to agent delivery eligibility. The bill also includes a provision to reimburse municipalities for the cost of administering special elections. The bill establishes a reimbursement process for counties and municipalities that incur costs administering state or federal special elections not currently held in conjunction with another state election. Overall, these changes modernize election statutes, streamline administration, and provide clearer guidance for election officials while maintaining election security. I understand there are a number of amendments, so I'd be happy to turn to those if that is your wish, Mr. Speaker.
There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Freiberg moves to amend House File number 4240, the first engrossment. The amendment is coded A4.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Freiberg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment lines up some language with the Senate. I've run it by Co-Chair Quam, and I'm hopeful that it will be viewed as friendly and encourage members to support it.
Discussion to the amendment. Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. The motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The chief clerk will report the amendment.
Kosnick moves to amend House File number 4240, the first engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A6.
I recognize the member from Dakota, Representative Kosnick.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, the A6 amendment helps provide a little more clarity and direction for school districts when they have special elections in the distribution of the more than likely condensed polling locations other than the polling locations in the general election. We currently give them that flexibility, and what this amendment does is just provides a little more direction that there should be a polling location in each county under certain requirements if they have a special election and more than one county in that school district. I can speak more on third reading.
I recognize the member from Ramsey, Representative Lee Kay.
Thank you, Speaker. I'm wondering if the author would yield to a couple questions.
The author of the amendment or the author of the bill?
The author of the amendment.
He will yield. Representative Lee Kay.
So I'm just wondering, because this amendment didn't come through the committee as a bill that we heard, what is the impact of the amendment across the state?
Representative Kosnick.
The impact across the state, we're not familiar with. It's pretty narrowly tailored to probably a school district in my district. We have not heard of other school districts across the state to provide this extra clarity.
Representative Lee Kay.
Thank you, Speaker. So I understand there's a situation in your district, but this is also why, right, like bills should come through the committee process. I have a letter here from the Minnesota School Boards Association just pointing out that 75% of school districts across our state actually span multiple counties. So that's 3 out of 4. And they think this might impact more than 90 school districts. And so I just want to make sure that members understand that when they were voting for this amendment. I'm also wondering if the author would yield to another question.
He will yield. Representative Lee Kay.
Does this amendment apply to early voting during the special elections?
Representative Kosnick. This amendment helps clarify. So currently, just to level base, current law gives direction for special elections that polling places must be designated throughout the school district, taking into account both geographic distribution and population distribution. I believe it does also encompass early voting. But the situation is, so current law, they should have geographic and political distributions considerations in locating the actual physical polling locations. And then what the bill does is that if there is more than one county and that county has at least 5,000 registered voters, there should be or shall be a polling location in the county so that the county with at least 5,000 registered voters is not disenfranchised, so a school district does not overtly or by accident disenfranchise voters in that other county if the school district has more than one county, if that should be pretty clear to you.
Representative Lee Kay.
Thank you, Speaker. So actually, I'll help you out, Representative Koznick. According to the statute, this amendment would not apply to the early voting portion of the special elections. If it did, it would be a larger problem because it might mean then that during early voting, it would cost the school board more money to finance the special election. And that is partially my concern with this amendment. Obviously, I will support it because it expands voter access, and that is on principle something that I care about as a member of the Elections Committee. I think the concern here is the impact of this amendment on school districts that would be affected, right? More than 91. So I just want to make sure that members understand that's exactly what we're voting on, and I will support it, but I want to make sure that we understand the implications. Thank you.
Further discussion to the amendment. I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Freiberg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for those questions, Vice Chair Lee. I do share some of the concerns about the potential cost on school districts, but it is under a pretty limited set of circumstances that it would apply. But I do agree ultimately that this is this will help improve voter access in some situations, so I plan to support the amendment.
Any further discussion to the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. The motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Heinzman moves to amend House File Number 4240, the first and Grossman as amended. The amendment is coded A8.
I recognize the member from Crow Wing, Representative Heinzman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this amendment addresses a recently recognized issue. Betting on items that have direct involvement or insider trading, as it's known, is prohibited by prediction markets. You can't bet on a game you're playing in. For example, since the integrity of our electoral process is essential to the functioning of our democratic republic, I would suggest we pass this amendment to make it clear that elected officials cannot profit from betting on their own race. While Minnesota Democrats have been caught trying to profit, a specific Minnesota Democrat, on his own race, House Republicans would like to make clear that this behavior is unacceptable. I would mention that this passed by a 0 to 67 margin in the Senate. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Recognize a member from Hennepin, Representative Freiberg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I encourage members to support this amendment.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Greenman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Representative Heinzman. I wish I would have brought this amendment myself. I am glad that this body took a position in support of banning prediction markets. I don't think we should be doing them at all. I think they corrupt our process, and I think members certainly shouldn't be voting on them. So thank you. I will be voting yes.
Any further discussion to the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. The motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Schultz moves to amend House File Number 4240, the first and Grossman as amended. The amendment is coded A5.
I recognize the member from Morrison, Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have the next friendly amendment for election integrity here in Minnesota. This amendment, Mr. Speaker, would ensure that when there's a request from the Department of Justice as it relates to ensuring the civil rights of Americans and enforcing federal voting laws, that our Secretary of State would provide, upon request, the appropriate voter information to ensure the civil rights of Americans, again, in accordance with federal election laws. And so, Mr. Speaker, on this note, I want to put up a strong bipartisan vote, and I'd ask for a roll call.
Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We know that there are concerns with voter fraud in Minnesota, and there is this great attempt across the entire nation to work at rooting out the voter fraud in each and every state. We have that role, that responsibility in Minnesota. There have been instances both highlighted on a national level and a local level, Mr. Speaker, with regards to election fraud happening in Minnesota. And so this only helps advance the civil rights of Americans by enforcing federal voting laws and to ensure that the Department of Justice has that appropriate access upon request to the voter and voter registration information that we have on hand here in Minnesota. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further discussion to the amendment. I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Greenman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate the roll call on this discussion. And I know, Representative Schultz, you're not on the election committee. I don't know if you ever have been, but what those of us who are know is that the federal government doesn't administer our elections or any state's elections, which is why states across the political spectrum have, from California to Mississippi, have, when asked by this Department of Justice for all of their voter files and the privacy that comes with it, have said no to turn over this data. And when the Trump administration sued Minnesota and 29 other states, what we have seen so far is courts throwing that out because the Department of Justice actually hasn't offered a reason that they need this information, and state and federal law does not allow Minnesota to turn that over. What this bill is trying to do, though, is circumvent that whole conversation and capitulate to Trump's bullying and threats. And the problem is it jeopardizes voter privacy and safety. The information that we'd be turning over, when the Secretary of State asked, how are you going to protect that privacy, they didn't have an answer. When they asked what legal use are you going to use for this, they didn't have an answer. And in fact, when they asked that, they didn't reply, and then they just sued. The thing that is concerning to me here is our job should not be to do the bidding of Donald Trump and his Department of Justice. Our job should be to protect voter safety and voter integrity and ensure that everyone can vote. The Secretary of State has, on a number of occasions, when there are specific investigations happening at the DOJ, shared information. That's what the law allows, and that's what the law protects for terms of voters. But here's what we do know, because there was a confidential memo that the DOJ was asking states to sign about what they wanted to do with this data. And we know this because one of the states released it. They want to conduct their own analysis of the state's voter file. They want to instruct states to remove Minnesota voters from that file within 45 days, which no federal government has ever done. The DOJ doesn't have the ability or understanding of how to do it. They don't run elections. Our local elections administrators do. And our states, as a matter of course, are doing this. And if you're on elections committee, you would have spent years talking about list maintenance and the work that our counties and our Secretary of State do. What the Department of Justice wants to do with this data likely violates state law. It probably violates the federal NVRA, and it puts voter security and their privacy at risk. It also puts voter access at risk. But that's not what any of this is about. And we know it because Trump's former Attorney General told us so. Pam Bondi, the day that Alex Preddy was killed by federal agents, said, and I quote, that Governor Walz, in a letter to Governor Walz could bring an end to this chaos in Minnesota that the federal government brought by turning over our voter rolls. It's not about voter security. That's about something entirely different. And the thing that is concerning to me on this is that this just plays into what we have seen all year with the Trump administration. I can't figure out my House GOP colleagues want to go along with it. But as the public sours on his agenda, as voters choose and reject the mega agenda, that gas prices go up, that we go to war with Iran, the chaos and corruption, we saw yesterday a special election in a very purple district that voters reject. We see executive order, after executive order that violate the Constitution, that try to take over our state elections. We see demands for our voter file, and we don't know what they're going to do with it. We see ransom letters to try to get a hold of it. And so this is not anything other than doing Trump's bidding on trying to, frankly, circumvent the will of the people. But when you talk about voter fraud, Representative Schultz, you must be talking about, when you talk about national voter fraud, the thing we all heard about in 2020, when the president asked a GOP Secretary of State to find him 11,780 votes to overturn an election he lost. Or maybe you're talking about what happened more recently when he abused the Department of Justice and sent them into Fulton County to confiscate ballot boxes to prove that his the election that he lost was somehow manufactured. If you are concerned about voter fraud, Representative Schultz, I think you should be introducing bills to protect us from the leaders who literally, on camera, on tape, on the phone, have been demanding fraud. But what we know, and we'll talk about on many of these bills, is that when the Heritage Foundation studied this, what they found was minuscule, was statistically insignificant. And we know that our laws work on this because we talked about it in Fraud Committee. And so the idea that what you want to do here is turn over the personal private information of Minnesota voters to a federal administration that is about a president that is both on record demanding voter fraud from a Republican Secretary of State and also is on record demanding our voter rolls as a ransom note, to me, that reflects none of the flowery language we heard in the last bill about the voice of democracy and the importance of people. So, members, this is an easy vote against this provision, and I'm glad you asked for a roll call because it's important that people, Minnesotans, know where we stand for their voter privacy.
I recognize the member from Goodhue, Representative Altendorf.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Schultz, for bringing this amendment forward. I completely disagree with some of the sentiments that we just heard about that this is Trump, it's Trump overreaching. In fact, the Minnesota elections, as you know, every 2 years there are federal elections on the ballot. And every time Minnesota becomes an outlier, when we are not being transparent and not showing our data so that anyone can verify it, we are disenfranchising other states and other people's votes in other states, which is completely unfair, absolutely unfair. There is no information in these voter rolls that is being requested by the DOJ that the federal government does not already have. That is a fact. There is no information, private information, that is being requested that the federal government does not already have. Now, we know that the DOJ did request from the states this information. Many of the states, many of the red states did comply with that request. And so it's very important to know, what did the DOJ find with the information that was turned over by the other states who were helping to make sure their voter rolls are clean? The DOJ found 350,000 dead people still on the voter rolls. The DOJ found 25,000 non-citizens on the voter rolls, and these are mostly in red states. So members, Minnesota has an obligation to the voters in our state. We also have an obligation to voters across the country that we are doing our due diligence to make sure that our voter rolls are clean. And there's absolutely no reason why we would not take the help from the federal government on this and allow them to help us clean up our voter rolls. Thank you, members. Please vote green for Representative Schultz amendment.
I recognize the member from Olmsted, Representative Smith.
This amendment is flabbergasting to me. I cannot understand this amendment. That any elected official would want to send private data of Minnesotans to this Department of Justice, or really to anyone, but especially to this Department of Justice. Let's take a moment and talk about the Department of Justice and what they have done to our fellow Minnesotans just in this calendar year. Because it's important Minnesotans know who their data is going to go to if this amendment offered by my Republican colleague is to be passed. Let's talk about the first week of this year. January 7th, one of our neighbors was shot and killed by a federal agent in our state. According to reports from the New York Times and The Guardian, senior DOJ leadership, including Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche and FBI Director Kash Patel, explicitly ordered career prosecutors and FBI agents to shut down a planned civil rights probe into the shooting, because those officials worried that an actual investigation would contradict the words of President Trump. God forbid that justice get in the way of what President Trump said. That directive led to 6 career prosecutors in the U.S. Attorney Office in the District of Minnesota resigning in protest. Not really in protest, but because they had semblance of ethics. They stood up for their fellow Minnesotans and did not allow that Justice Department to turn into the Injustice Department for our Minnesotans. And now you want to take the private data of Minnesotans and send it to that Department of Justice. Whistleblower information provided to the Senate Judiciary Committee shared that the FBI's Forensic Response Section was originally prepared to execute a warrant to process Renee Good's vehicle for a shooting reconstruction. Director Patel again got in the way, ordered agents to rewrite the warrant to remove language referencing Good as a victim. Instead,
Mr. Speaker, point of parliamentary inquiry. I thought we were on my A5
State your point
amendment.
of parliamentary inquiry.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, again, what is our point of business? I thought we were debating my A5 amendment, Mr. Speaker. Am I wrong?
You are correct. We're discussing your amendment, the A5 amendment. Representative Smith, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Speaker. Let's see, lines 1.5 of your amendment, it says, provide to the United States Department of Justice any data that relates to voters and elections in the state. So I want to talk about what the United States Department of Justice means to people of this state. As I was saying, Kash Patel ordered the change to the warrant to remove language referencing Good as victim and instead sought to frame Good as the subject of a criminal investigation. A federal magistrate judge reportedly rejected the altered warrant because it is legally unsound to name a deceased person as a criminal suspect for the purposes of a search. So they changed it to an investigation to the widow of Renee Good, Becca Good, for allegedly interfering, their words, with an ICE operation because she was filming the incident. A faux charge that they have used against tens, if not hundreds, if not thousands of our citizens, because we were merely recording the unjust, unconstitutional actions of this Department of Justice and the Department of Homeland Security. 1 week later, January 14th, 2026, another one of our citizens was shot. And again, court filings revealed the agents had lied about their report of the incident. They were actually mistaking that individual for a different person. And he was shot in the leg through a closed door of his own duplex after agents chased them to their home by mistake.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to a point of parliamentary inquiry.
State your point of parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And to Representative Smith, I appreciate your attention to detail on my amendment. The next line, if you would, I would ask you to continue to read beyond this, the part that you mentioned, Mr. Speaker, as it goes on to say, if the department
Mr. Speaker, point of order.
To use
Representative
the data
Schultz,
solely.
it's not a part of the parliamentary inquiry.
Yep.
You don't get to use this time to butt in and make statements. I will remind everyone that we are going to have a discussion on this amendment. Let's not move too far afield. We are moving too far afield. Let's have an actual discussion on the amendment. Representative Smith, you still continue to have this floor.
Thank you, Speaker. The Department of Justice that is being asked to have the personal information of Minnesotans who vote had to drop these charges because of the lies presented in that court case. This reversal occurred after another mass exodus of federal prosecutors in the Minnesota U.S. Attorney's Office. At least 14 prosecutors this time resigned, citing disgust over how senior Department of Justice officials in Washington were manipulating the facts of the Minneapolis shooting to protect federal agents. More brave Minnesotans who cared more about the people living in this state even than their own jobs. What an example to set for all of us. Then, of course, Saturday, January 24th, Alex Preddy was shot and killed on our streets by federal agents. And once again, the Department of Justice falsely manipulated the narrative, tweeting out pictures of a gun that wasn't in any sort of sealed container, withheld evidence, and intimidated witnesses, which is illegal. And by the way, in all of these cases, they purposefully shut out our local and state officials from investigating these instances, time and time again. That's what this Department of Justice has done to Minnesota. And outside of even this Department of Justice is not working as it should. An Associated Press report from May 2026 found that district court judges have ruled the administration violated court orders in at least 31 different lawsuits since early 2025, last year, this Department of Justice. They don't care what the courts say. They don't care what the law says. They don't care what the Constitution says. They only care what President Donald Trump says. This Justice Department has gutted units and divisions that protect civil rights and hold corrupt politicians accountable. The Civil Rights Division reportedly has been gutted by 70% under Donald Trump. Similarly, the Public Integrity Unit, which I think is very important and is responsible for investigating the corruption of politicians, from the original 36 lawyers that worked in that department, is now down to 2. This Justice Department has defended an executive order attempting to end birthright citizenship, which is in direct violation of the 14th Amendment of our Constitution. Not to mention this Justice Department's continual attempted cover-up of the largest sex trafficking operation in U.S. history by not releasing the Epstein files. That's who you want to send Social Security numbers, addresses, information on voting to Minnesotans. You want to send them that information. I don't understand it. How could you have so much loyalty to your party and not to the people? Vote no on this amendment.
I recognize the member from Olmsted, Representative Quam.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And, well, frankly, I need to let the people watching and the members here that aren't that maybe familiar with federal, state election law interactivity. Back in 1960, has to do with somebody stated that federal government has no rights and can't have anything to do with elections down here. In 1960, President Dwight Eisenhower signed the Civil Rights Act of 1960 into law. That act, which allows federal officials to examine local voter registrations and penalize any state that denies a citizen their right to vote, to register and vote. That is one example where federal government and federal agents have been involved. That law was delayed by 125 hours by 18 members of the Democrat Senate at that time. The idea that we don't, well, first of all, this is part of the whole thing to fix the Jim Crow issues in the South that were controlled by a party, which I probably don't have to tell you which one. And there was a lot of activity by the federal government to correct that and fix that. So that's proven history that there is interactions, plus the fact that we have, during odd-numbered years, I mean even-numbered years, elections for the federal offices where we do have to abide by federal law and statute. There was another comment just recently, what has the DOJ done for Minnesota? Well, over 100 charged and dozens of convictions of fraud that Minnesota apparently wasn't capable of actually pursuing and charging and convicting for the fraud. Now, this did start under the Biden administration. So it's not just the current presidency, where the DOJ has come into Minnesota, they've charged and gotten convictions. So that's something the DOJ is doing. The idea that there is no reason for them to have any data, the Help America Vote Act, it's been around for a long time. Very long time. In that act, there are requirements, and if a registration doesn't meet some specific certain data, that then the states are required to go to a Social Security Administration website and verify the registration. And in that process, there's part of the social, the legal name, birth date, a legal address. There's data that is shared, personal data that's shared. Minnesota shared hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of registrations. I could look back, it's probably crossed into the millions. But that's what all the states do. They follow federal election law. They share that data. Now, why would the DOJ want to have a look at our registration information? Well, recently, we've had multiple convictions of voter registration fraud across at least a dozen of our counties. Hundreds and hundreds of people, fake people, registered in our system. And that's proven by convictions because the feds are enforcing law. There are also issues where multiple non-citizens have been caught voting in Minnesota. There are well, I probably don't have to go into all the specifics, but you've got proven cases and convictions across multiple aspects of our system, and I don't have to think very hard as to why they might be wanting to look further especially when you're investigating a case. Representative Pitto's not here, but when you're a prosecutor and you're investigating and you're looking into things, one of the things you do is, I'm investigating this case, but there's additional data, information here, which leads me to believe there's further crime going on. So what are you going to do? You're going to ask for information to help clarify those issues. But once again, the data is shared. Some people are saying, well, they don't share the driver's license information and this other information. Well, actually, that is shared in a a national database that is utilized by not just states, because there's a former Minnesotan that tried to get under a different name from Arizona driver's license, but because of the database, they discovered that. And they also held that person because that was somebody that was trafficking underage children across state lines. So there's already that sharing of Minnesota data that includes driver's license data across state lines across the country. So there really isn't much of private data that's not already shared. We've got court cases and et cetera. We've got a history of the federal government actually enforcing, checking out registration and other activities in the states, and then having convictions, penalizing them. So I don't understand why I'm hearing some people say, well, we don't do, that can't be done. They can't have that data since they already have. They can't enforce election law in a state. Well, they have extensively, and if they teach history in schools, you would know that. So I see nothing wrong, outrageous, with this amendment. It actually saves some time because apparently the state of Minnesota isn't quite ready and activated enough to pursue the fraud and crime and issues in the state, which has been proven by convictions by the federal government, Biden administration, Trump administration, of where we have dropped the ball by not taking care of our business. So vote green on this amendment.
I recognize the member from Ramsey, Representative Lee Kay.
Thank you, Speaker. I wanted to rise to just make a very clear point that Minnesota's elections are fair, accurate, honest, and secure. There seems to be an implication that they're not, and like that's why we need this. But I just want to make sure that folks understand what Representative Greenman talked about earlier. Every step of the way, we have local officials, county officials who are honest Minnesotans who work hard to ensure that their neighbors, their friends, and our community members are able to secure a ballot. I also thought it was really important to talk about how offensive it is to weaponize the Voting Rights Act for other I guess, goals or objectives that are meant to disenfranchise people. There seems to be this implication that something is going awry in Minnesota, but that's just further from the truth. The Secretary of State has provided the Department of Justice with detailed explanations of how we manage and secure our voter registration files, and they haven't alleged any wrongdoing, right? And so I just want to make that really clear. Furthermore, there have been numerous requests for other states' voting rolls in Oregon and in California. And in all of these cases that have gone to litigation, it was found that the court rejected the bid for the Oregon voter rolls on its first ruling, and in California, the California Secretary of State also won that case, citing the fact that this is just not necessary. And so, if anyone has any questions on whether our elections are fair and safe and secure, they absolutely are. I mean, you may have if you've heard the allegations and implications from the other side, you may not know that, but the facts are our elections are safe and honest and secure, and want to make sure that folks understand that. Thank you.
Recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Freiberg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll be brief. We've had a pretty robust discussion on this amendment, but there are several examples of voter fraud cited. This amendment wouldn't do anything about it. Those were identified by counties and would not have been identified if the DOJ had gotten a copy of the voter rolls. It was found by count election administrators who then referred to the paper forms, who then referred the paper forms to law enforcement and the county attorney for investigation. And just to kind of elaborate on what Vice Chair Lee said, every case that's so far been decided on this matter has been dismissed, meaning every court that's ruled has said that the DOJ does not have a right to this sensitive voter data. The cases in California, Michigan, and Oregon have been dismissed, and the DOJ has appealed those rulings. The cases in Arizona, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island have also been dismissed. So this amendment is searching for a problem, and I encourage members to vote no.
Any further discussion? I recognize the author of the amendment, the member from Morrison, Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for the robust debate. I thought for certain that I was going to get Representative Greenman, Representative Smith, and others on board with this very friendly amendment to ensure the integrity of our elections. Because the fact of the matter is, despite the comments made on the other side of the aisle, there are there have been convictions showing that there has been fraud in our elections. That has been proven on a federal level and on a local level. And what this does, and for the record, for the body, for Minnesotans watching at home, and for the record, Mr. Speaker, this provides the sorts of protections that we need. This specifically says, in law, if this were to be passed, Mr. Speaker, that the sole purpose of this information being shared to the Department of Justice is to ensure that we have the security in our elections and we are in line with federal election law. That is protecting the civil rights of Americans, Mr. Speaker. So this is quite quick, quite easy. We have a lot of work to do yet this evening. This is something that all members should be voting green for election integrity, because there has been voter fraud. And a perfect example of this, Mr. Speaker, is when there was a candidate for office from the city of Roseville attempting to become a member of this body and didn't even live in his own district. Mr. Speaker, I ask for a green vote on this amendment.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. The clerk will call the names of the members voting remotely.
Allen.
Allen votes aye.
Allen votes aye. Burkle.
Burkle, go.
Burkle votes aye.
Burkle votes aye. Kozlowski.
No. Try it again.
Oh, they're gone.
Kozlowski. McDonald. McDonald.
McDonald.
McDonald, yes.
McDonald votes aye. Momani Hiltzley.
Momani Hiltzley, no.
Momani Hiltzley votes no. Wolgamott.
Wolgamott, no.
Wolgamott votes no. Kozlowski.
Okay, you're up. One more time.
The clerk will close the look.
All right, thanks. Appreciate
Wait. Kozlowski said no. It's fine, friend. Say it.
Kozlowski votes no.
Kozlowski votes no.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 67 yeas and 67 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The chief clerk will report the amendment.
Altendorf moves to amend House File Number 4240, the first engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A10.
I recognize a member from Goodhue, Representative Altendorf.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, as we just voted down that last amendment to share with the federal, the DOJ, to make sure our voter rolls are clean, I no doubt have every bit of confidence that you will support this amendment. This amendment simply is asking the Secretary of State to verify the eligibility and the citizenship of every voter each year prior to the absentee ballots being distributed, being sent out. And then they must certify to the legislature in writing that this was done. This is good governance, folks. This is, as I just heard Vice Chair Lee say, that our elections are fair, accurate, honest, and secure. And absolutely everybody wants to believe that, but there does need to be verification. There absolutely needs to be verification. The Secretary of State already says that they verify eligibility. So if they do, that's great. But all we're asking in this is a report now to the legislature to follow up so that we all can verify the vote. This is very important legislation. This needs to be added to this bill. I think all of us are tired of the conversations back and forth, questioning our elections. It happens on both sides. And how we get there to build our confidence in our citizens is full transparency, which we absolutely do not have in the state of Minnesota right now with our voters. We absolutely need to verify the vote. It is not fair to the Minnesota citizens that we are not showing any sort of avenue for the voters to know that the voter rolls have been cleaned. You state they are. You state they're fair. You state our elections are accurate. And yet you deny over and over and over any means for us to verify them at a state level or a federal level. Mr. Speaker, this is so important. And every time that we have one person that is on the voter rolls that is voting and it is not a valid vote, it is disenfranchising a Minnesota voter. Mr. Speaker, I do ask for a roll call vote on this.
Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Altendorf.
Thank you.
I recognize a member from Hennepin, Representative Greenman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And here we are again with an amendment that is in search of a problem, but actually creates its own problems. Minnesota has great high voter turnout. We are all proud of that. And a lot of that reflects people's interest and desire to participate in our democracy. And when Representative Lee or Representative Freiberg say that the elections are fair and accurate, you say you, but what they're doing is telling you what our local elections administrators in all 87 counties and the folks at the city who are actually the ones who administer our elections are doing. And they reflect the transparency with which they do their jobs. They invite people in, they show how it works. People are there for all steps of the process. So I really hope, Representative Altendorf, what you're not doing is turning this into a partisan fight that will further erode people's confidence in our elections. Because what I know about Minnesotans is they believe in their vote, and they believe in their elections administrators. And we both know that only citizens are eligible to vote, and it's already a crime to vote if you're a citizen. It's a felony. In fact, it's a deportable offense, and it prevents anybody who, if that happens, it bars them to citizenship. It's a serious criminal consequences, which is why, despite your rhetoric, the facts show non-citizen voting has never been a problem. Even the Conservative Heritage Foundation's election fraud case database, quote unquote, showed that non-citizen voting was so rare to be statistically non-existent. 77 cases between 1999 and 2003 where 1 billion votes were cast. That's 0.0000764%. So that's the problem you're trying to solve. But what I worry about with your bill is what it will do to eligible voters, to citizens in your district and in my district that want to cast their ballot. What it'll do to our elections administration. And so looking at this bill, there's only a couple of lines. I have a few questions about how this bill will work. Mr. Speaker, would Representative Altendorf yield for a question?
Representative Altendorf, will you yield? She will yield. Representative Greenman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Altendorf, under your bill, what are the mechanism and the documents that are going to be used to verify a voter's citizenship status?
Representative Altendorf.
Mr. Speaker and members, that's a great question. Thank you, Representative Greenman. That is not included specifics, but we do have the Office of the Secretary of State that is well-staffed, and we do have confidence that they would be able to do this. This is not a difficult thing to do. As I said, the Secretary of State already says they verify the voter rolls, and this is just now reporting to the Minnesota legislature. That's all this is.
Representative Greenman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will Representative Altendorf continue to yield to a question?
She will not yield. Representative Greenman.
Well, that's unfortunate, because you have a bill here that may disenfranchise every married woman who changes their name, and you actually don't have in your bill any protections or any agreement. Let me tell you the questions I was going to ask Representative Altendorf.
She will yield if you wish.
She will yield?
Yep, she will
okay.
now.
Okay, thank you. Great. We have some work to do on this bill. Representative Altendorf, what specific documents are voters allowed to and required to show to verify citizenship status?
Representative Altendorf.
Mr. Speaker, I would yield to Elliott.
So that's unless Representative Greenman would like to ask Representative Engen to yield, that would be the appropriate method.
Mr. Speaker, I guess before yielding to Representative Engen, I'm a little confused why the author of the amendment doesn't know the answer to the question. But if Representative Engen has further information that is not in this language, the body would love to hear.
He will yield. Representative Greenman.
Thank you.
Representative Engen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would Representative Greenman repeat the question? I don't actually know what she's inquiring on, but I was happy to take it regardless.
Representative Greenman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is very serious business. You are playing with people's eligible voters with their vote. And so it may be funny to you, Representative Engen, but there is a bill, it's 3 sentences, you should look at the amendment, that specifically says the Secretary of State must verify citizenship and eligibility of each voter whose record is contained in the system. And the question I asked was, first, what mechanism and documents will be used to show? And I didn't have an answer. The second question I ask is, what specific documents can someone use to prove citizenship? What's allowed?
Representative Engen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You could use a plethora of different items. One of them would be a federal ID, a passport, a birth certificate. These are all items in which people utilize to go to the airport, to fly internationally to, there's a whole host of reasons as to why somebody would use this to demonstrate their American citizenship status, amongst them being voting. If they were eligible, then it'd be perfect. Everything right as rain.
Representative Greenman.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative Engen. Federal ID doesn't necessarily verify citizenship. Birth certificate may or may not include your current legal name. These are all actually long conversations they've been having at the federal level as they have been looking, and it is all spelled out in federal law. And that's where the concern comes from. But right here, there's actually nothing spelled out. So I guess I'd ask, moving on from the documents, which it's not entirely clear, could you use an enhanced ID? It's not here, yes or no. Could you use a birth certificate with your name change? Not entirely clear. Could you use a tribal ID? Doesn't say. We don't pass laws like this that impact people's fundamental right to vote. But I actually have a question about how this would be administered if the author of the amendment would yield to another question.
Will you yield, Representative Altendorf? That's a yes. She will yield.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So if this law went into effect, how and where would an eligible voter be required to verify these documents? In person, electronically, how would that work?
Mr. Speaker.
Representative Altendorf.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Greenman, I know you are trying to dilute the conversation here. The amendment is very, very simple. The Secretary of State already states that they verify eligibility and citizenship of people on our voter rolls. We are asking that on a yearly basis that the Secretary of State office verifies it as they say they already do. This is not dependent on the individual voters. Representative Greenman, we're not trying to make this more difficult for people to vote, even though I know you're trying to dilute what this does. This is simply asking for a report from the Secretary of State to the state legislature to verify to us that they indeed have verified that the people on the voter rolls are legitimate.
Representative Greenman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's clear I will not ask any of my other elections administration questions which elections administrators ask so that they know how to implement our law. But one of them might be, would it require all 3.4 million Minnesotans who are on the rolls to get re-registered? And the other I would ask is, this doesn't have an effective date. So that means, as we all know, it would go into effect in August, 2.5 months before an election. So is that your intent, that we are going to re-register 3.4 million people ahead of the election? I certainly hope not. And it is you could have answered all of these questions in your bill, but you didn't. And then the other question that I think the last amendment brought us is voter privacy, voter data. Because if voters are going to have to be sharing data, like a social security number, which we protect in our current SVRS, but if they're showing other types of documents like Representative Engen mentioned, whether it's a passport or a birth certificate or anything else, are there laws, current laws, that protect that information? I would want to know that. So even though the bill author doesn't know how this would work, it is important that we, this body, is focused on how to protect elections administration being able to do their job and voters being able to vote. And well, this bill is a solution in search of not. Let me start over. Well, this bill, this amendment, is a problem in solution of a non-existent problem that even the Heritage Foundation couldn't find more than negligible evidence of. It does create serious and real problems for Minnesota voters, problems that we should not continue to put barriers and hurdles and now privacy concerns all months before they will cast their vote. So, members, this is not, again, not a hard vote. I think you asked for a roll call. I'm glad you did, because I think the idea to Minnesotans who believe and care about their right to vote, who are looking forward to voting in the next state, local, and federal elections, and have this kind of reckless and not thought out amendment that wasn't vetted in the elections committee, that isn't a policy that we've been talking about, potentially stand in the way of their right to vote. We're not going to let that happen, members. We are going to vote. You should vote no on this, even if you believe and have been following the conversation at the federal level, which will disenfranchise millions more. But this didn't even do the thinking that they've been doing at the federal level. So members, if you want to stand up for both the right to vote and the rights of our local elections administrations to administer their elections, this is an easy red vote.
I recognize a member from Ramsey, Representative Finke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also have a few questions. I'm happy to ask them to Representative Quam. I saw your note that you were happy to yield. And these are not questions that, these are not hostile questions. These are very present questions. People who read Alpha News know I'm transgender. They recently wrote a whole story about it and how I used to have one name and now I have another name. So my first question, if you will yield, Representative Quam, is if we pass this and we have to verify our citizenship every year, can I vote?
He will yield. Representative Quam.
Yes, because, for example, I know a lot of people who have name changes, my wife being one. She's gotten a passport, done a lot of other things, and she is legal to vote. She does a lot of times. I hope she votes for me even.
Representative Finke.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Representative Quam. So we keep saying a lot of documents, but I do want to just answer this question. There are 2 documents for a citizen of the United States who was born in the United States to prove their citizenship. There are not a lot of documents. There are 2. And it is your birth certificate or an unexpired passport. Those are the only options. So let's say we pass this and I am a transgender person and I change my name, but I do not change my birth certificate because that costs extra money and it's very complicated for people who don't understand how to do these things. Representative Quam, in that circumstance, could I vote?
He will continue to yield. Representative Quam.
If you legally change your name, yes.
Representative Finke.
So I don't understand how that can be true, Representative Quam, because I have to verify my citizenship and I changed my name, but I didn't change my passport and I didn't change my birth certificate, which I will have you know, only 50% of Americans, about 52% of Minnesotans, from what I could tell, have an unexpired passport. Good for us. We are traveling folks. 50% have documents that unexpired passports. But that number for my community, that number goes way down. It goes dramatically down. And when it comes to changing your birth certificate for trans people, that's actually quite a burdensome process. And I know that we are having this conversation nationally, and I know that we are having this conversation locally, and you're not telling the truth. If your goal is to verify the citizenship, and you can only verify your citizenship, which is true to verify your citizenship to vote, that you need a current passport or a current birth certificate, you are clearing people out of voting. Minnesota has the highest, I'm very proud of this, we have the highest percentage of adult transgender people in America. We are building something really beautiful here for our community. I'm very proud of it. And if we have to do this, If we change our name and we get a real ID that has that name on it, and it has our gender on it, and we do not change our birth certificate, and we do not change our passport, which is the legal status of about 85% of transgender people in America, if this is what the law says, will we be able to vote? Representative Quam, if you would yield.
He will continue to yield. Representative Quam.
Yes, absolutely, because a legal document such as a marriage certificate, a legal document changing your name, because the HAVA SSA site references the legal name, then you would be able to, because I know people that have changed their name and they haven't changed their birth certificate. Birth certificate is rarely changed, and they have voted. So obviously, yes.
I'm sorry, Representative Quam. I am asking if we pass this law or not. Would that be true? I know what the current law is. The current law allows us to vote, and it does not require you to show proof of citizenship to vote. It requires you to be registered. You have to be able to be here legally and able to vote, but what we do not do right now, and for better or worse, honestly, for better or worse, but if you will not acknowledge that this is saying we need to verify the citizenship every year, and people have mismatched documents, you are taking away the right to vote from transgender people. I don't know who's in the gallery. Hello up there. This is a real problem. This is a real problem. An even bigger problem is that you're not willing to honestly acknowledge the work that you are doing. You are changing the law to require verification of citizenship every single year. That means every single time a person changes their name without changing their legal citizenship proving documents, they will be removed from the voting rolls. Representative Altendorf, will you yield?
She will yield. Representative Finke.
Is it your intention to have people whose documents are not matching with their documentation of passport or birth certificate with their current legal name removed from the voting rolls?
Representative Altendorf.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Finke. I want to make this perfectly clear to this body and to Minnesota. This whole discussion has gone down a whole road that it was not meant to. We are not re-registering everyone to vote. We are not. We are asking the Secretary of State, who verifies the voter rolls, to now submit that documentation to the state legislature. That is all that this bill does, and I absolutely reject every point that is being made by the Democrat Party that is trying to dilute this amendment, which is just showing verification of the voter rolls to the Minnesota State Legislature, because at this time, there is no checks and balances of Steve Simon and the Secretary of State's office. Zero.
Representative Finke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the opportunity to raise these questions. You know, we should at least be honest and acknowledge that we are making things here, and attempting to anyways, burdensome for certain communities. And, you know, I know that in the other body, they talked about married women. And I know that, you know, that's a different categorical part of our culture. Our demography, when we think about people, we think about married people differently than we think about transgender people. And I just wanted to make sure we had a chance, as we build a vibrant trans capital of America here and continue to do that work, that we recognize that the actions that we have, the things that we think we might be doing to make life easier for citizens often redound on my community in a way that is eradicationist, frankly. Let's take people away from their right to vote. I mean, even on the floor right now, I can't even get a Republican member to acknowledge how you verify your citizenship. This isn't a mystery. There are laws. We verify citizenship in certain ways. And for some reason, we can't even agree on how we do that, because for you to agree to that would have to admit that transgender people are being put in a situation you deny exists, but is very real and already having massive consequences on our community. So I appreciate this time. Please vote no on the amendment. And please, if you don't understand the laws that you're trying to pass, consider not passing them.
I recognize a member from Cass, Representative Knutson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members, Representative Finke. I think women are smart enough to figure out how to vote. I, for example, was born as Krista Kruzmark. I got married. I changed my name. I got a legal document, a marriage license. I went to apply for my driver's license. I brought my legal document, my marriage license that said my name had changed from Kruzmark to Knutson. They said, great, stamped it and gave me my driver's license. Going to vote, I brought that driver's license, my birth certificate, and my marriage license, and was able to register to vote. Women have figured this out, and we've been doing this for decades. We are smart enough to figure out how to register to vote in this country.
I recognize a member from Ramsey, Representative Lee Kay.
Thank you, Speaker. And I guess I know some of my colleagues have tried to ask the author how this would work operationally. I don't know if Representative Altendorf wants to answer that question now.
Are you asking her to
Yes.
yield?
Would she yield to explain how the amendment would work? No.
It appears as though she's done yielding, Representative Lee Kay.
That's okay. Well, I'll ask another question. I mean, I actually want to know, if we pass this amendment, how would naturalized citizens vote? And Representative Altendorf, I mean, would you be able to yield to that question?
Will you yield? She will yield, Representative Lee Kay.
How would naturalized citizens vote?
Representative Altendorf.
So, Mr. Speaker, this does not change the registration of voting at all. So when someone is voting and they have a social security number or a valid ID that allows them to vote, and they have been added to the voter rolls, this amendment does not change any of that. It does not change any of that. If we scan the voter rolls and they do not have a valid ID, that when they registered, or if there is someone that is dead, they would be removed. That is up to the Secretary of State right now to validate that our voter rolls are clean. And again, there's these tactics to go back to registration. This is not an amendment about registration. It is about the Secretary of State office providing a report to the Minnesota State Legislature verifying that they have verified the voter rolls are clean.
Representative Lee Kay.
Great, thank you, Speaker. So I didn't get an answer to my question, because we want to know how the Secretary of State would actually administer this. I really appreciate Representative Finke bringing up concerns about how much it would cost to get a passport issued or to get a new birth certificate issued. For naturalized people, their replacement naturalization certificate would cost as much as $555. That is really expensive. If you haven't read the news recently, right, like most people in America don't have more than $400 in savings because of the way capitalism has eaten at all of the earnings and then the money that working families have tried to save. And so also want to point out how this amendment actually, seeks to disenfranchise certain groups of people. I want to also talk about the other impact of this, right? As a daughter of refugees and naturalized citizens, this is an amendment that would also, I believe, and experts have said, this is an amendment aimed at intimidating our multiracial, multilingual democracy. And so that's why I urge members to vote no. Thanks.
I recognize the member from Wright, Representative Hudson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I got good news for you. This dystopia that you fear, where we go through the trouble of verifying citizenship and eligibility for everybody that registers to vote, you're living in it right now. It exists. We already do this. How? Well, when people register, their information is checked against the DVS database, the Social Security Administration database, the Department of Health, court records, looking for duplicates, prior registrations, conflicts. Other checks are made as well. Department of Corrections, looking for criminal records, because that used to be relevant to whether or not you could vote in this state. And it used to be that if you merely had a driver's license, we knew you were a citizen, because you couldn't get one otherwise. You guys changed that, so that muddied the waters a little bit. But today, right now, people's eligibility and citizenship is being verified. We don't have to reinvent the wheel, and this amendment doesn't attempt to. As has been noted by several members, this is a very short bill. It reads, at least yearly, prior to use of the statewide voter registration system by an official to administer absentee voting at an election as required by this section, the Secretary of State must verify citizenship and eligibility of each voter whose record is contained in the system. Contained in it. It's already there. Contained in. The Secretary must certify compliance with this section in writing, along with details on the results of the verification process to the chairs and ranking minority members of the legislative committees with jurisdiction over elections, so on and so forth. That's pretty simple. Give us a report every year telling us you did what you already do. Just give us the results. Let us know how it's working. The way this is being portrayed as if this changes how we already register to vote or how often we have to. You're not going to have to re-register. This doesn't compel people to re-register. It looks at information that's already in the system. Every election that comes around, as long as you didn't move or have some other status change that makes you ineligible to vote in the precinct where you live, you don't have to register every time. And whenever you did have to register the first time, you had to go through all the rigmarole. And if it's such a burden, my God, to get documents that everyone has, birth certificate, driver's license, social security card, this is an entirely invented and imagined burden that already exists, and we all carry it. We've all had to do this. People will continue to have to do this the first time they register, and this is going to put no burden whatsoever on that voter that they don't already currently have.
I recognize a member from Ramsey, Representative Feist.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm so glad I'm next, because I have a rebuttal, but I had already signed up to speak. So I was born Sandra Kreider, and then I got married to my ex-husband, who I won't say his name, because whatever. Forgot about him. Anyway, but we were married and we were divorced in New Orleans. And then I evacuated here after Hurricane Katrina. And I did have a certified copy of my divorce decree back then, but then my stupid ex-husband did not have a copy, and he lives in England. And so he asked me to mail my copy, my only copy, because he could not get a new copy from New Orleans because it kind of broke, like their record system after Hurricane Katrina just kind of broke, and he could not get a certified copy of our divorce decree. And so I mailed it to him in England, and he did not mail it back to me like he promised, which was like hugely shocking. But I did have it at the time that I got married to my current husband, Ben Feist, I will say his name. And I did get a passport in my current married name. But I am concerned that, what Representative Knudsen described, that would be my current situation that I was able to do, but I no longer can do because my divorce decree is like lost to the ages. It's like lost in a void. So I'm not sure how this amendment would work for me, and I'm not sure I would be able to vote. So that's what I wanted to share. Thank you.
I recognize a member from Ramsey, Representative Finke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I apologize for taking the mic twice in the same debate, but I actually am really glad that the representative from District 5 made the comments that she did about women and how women are capable of changing their documentation, because I do think it's important for us to recognize, I agree with that, as a woman and as a person who understands that people can change their documentation. The thing that I think is important, and Representative Hudson said this too, everybody has these documents. People can change these documents. And the reality is, and the reason that this is such a sticking point, is that not everyone has these documents. 69 million American women do not have a birth certificate or a passport that matches their married name. 69 million. It's not because they don't know how to do it. It's because they got other shit to do. They're busy. Their life is being lived. Apologies for the virgin years over there. I didn't mean to cuss, but I'm just saying people are busy and they don't have these documents. Everybody doesn't have them just because they can have them. So when we raise these points of objection to this, it is not because we are impugning someone's ability to live well. It's because people don't get their documents all the time. That's it. 69 million American married women do not have one of those two documents that matches their name. I do, because I got married to my wife, and then I had an article written about what my name was and what it used to be, and I said, oh my goodness, I forgot to change one of my documents, and then I went and got it changed. That's what it means to have to change your documents.
I recognize a member from Anoka, Representative Engen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think that this entire conversation's gotten a little bit off the rails because it is a 3-sentence amendment about citizenship in our electoral voting system here in Minnesota. You guys talked about Russia collusion for a long time. You don't want Russia to collude in our elections, maybe don't allow Russians to vote in our elections. You guys want to talk about how it's so hard to change documents, but then follow it up with how easy it was to go and change a document? You have cities like New York and Minneapolis that have gone and said and voted to allow non-citizens to vote in their elections. And now when we say, hey, we want to make sure that that doesn't happen here in Minnesota state elections, you get really inquisitive all of a sudden. There's a lot of questions. Like the workability piece is the real restraint here. You've seen the polling on like how all Americans don't want non-citizens to vote in our elections. So you can't outwardly just say, no, we want non-citizens to vote in our elections. But instead, we're going to talk about the feasibility and, oh, there's going to be a lot of constraints to this, a lot of hoop jumping, like easily changing documents. And then you belabor the point and you make it look as if you actually care about the substance of the debate, when the substance of the debate is pretty darn simple. Minnesota citizens, U.S. citizens, voting in Minnesota elections. Fairest, freest elections. Make it the fairest and freest. Make it so that some right-wing nut from some far-off land who shouldn't be here can't vote in an election. Because right now it seems like you kind of want that.
I recognize a member from Hennepin, Representative Katiza-Watun.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The issue is not that this is only a 3-sentence amendment. It's that this situation is much more complicated than is reflected in these 3 sentences. I mentioned earlier that 3 of my kids are adopted. When you go through the process as a child who enters the out-of-home placement system, your documents may not come with you every time. You may not be able to, for a period of time, have access to that. People move between homes, people, enter in and out of marriages and are not able to have access to that documentation. People, I'm the self-appointed chair of the Hyphen Caucus, and I must give the respect that's due to former Representative Jamie Becker-Finn, who insisted that we be allowed to put hyphenated names on the voting board here at the Minnesota House. Thank you, Representative Becker-Finn. There's 5 of us now, and just this is a story about the technology that needs to go along with this process. Because when you choose to hyphenate your name, like I did, so that I could have every vowel, A-E-I-O-U and Y, Mr. Speaker, some of the technology that when you put your name into a system, it says special characters not allowed. Now, I am a special character. It's true, we can all agree, it's okay. My hyphen is also a special character. I chose to have that as a part of my name, but I have had conversations with airport security in which my name has been squished into one because they don't recognize hyphens for whatever reason. It is 2026. I think we can figure out the technology to allow people to have hyphens in the middle of their names. I am concerned that when an airline tries not to let me on an international flight because the ticket says Carly Katiza Watoon and my passport says Carly Katiza -Watoon, that this could happen to people who are just trying to register to vote. And so we can't just say, this is a simple amendment and it's only 3 sentences long, because it just doesn't work like that in practice. So that's why we are having a long debate about this. And it deserves a long debate, because unless we think through every circumstance in which somebody could be negatively impacted and their right to vote as an American citizen taken away from them, we should not move forward with this. People who are not citizens are not allowed to vote in our elections. The driver's licenses that undocumented Minnesotans have access for do not qualify them to vote in the state of Minnesota. That's not happening. And in fact, when we look at the voter fraud that has happened in the state of Minnesota, it is people from greater Minnesota, oftentimes, maybe trying to vote with their dead mother's absentee ballot for President Trump. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I recognize a member from Anoka, Representative Cagle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, just want to remind people what our job here is. It's to make deliberate, thoughtful public policy. Understanding the impacts of this policy is part of our job. Listening to feedback as constructive criticism is actually a good thing, because then you can figure out what are some of the problems with your piece of legislation, instead of just thinking that it's absolutely perfect and no feedback is worth my time. Listening to people, believing them, thinking about where they're coming from. We understand that there's I understand the privilege I have, but not everybody has that privilege. So maybe try thinking outside of your little narrow bubble, thinking about how this will affect the greater good, the citizens of Minnesota. And I think there's just one glaring thing that has been bothering me probably since I started here, is that there's me people and there's we people. And we are we people.
I recognize a member from Anoka, Representative Niska.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. You know, if you just read the amendment, I think it's actually pretty easy to see why you should vote yes on this amendment. It doesn't say anything about any obligation of anyone to get any specific documents. It only imposes an obligation on the Secretary of State to verify the citizenship and eligibility of each voter whose record is contained in the system. And I guess it's really interesting what we've heard from the other side of the aisle. We've basically heard two broad arguments. One was a really interesting one at the beginning from Representative Greenman. It's already a crime. It's already a crime. Of course, we don't in this body, we don't really do stuff to try to prevent things that are already crimes, right? If it's a crime, you know, it's a crime. Why would we do anything more? Why would we pass funding for Capitol security to prevent people from doing crimes here at the Capitol? If it's a crime, just making it a crime. Of course, people aren't going to do it. Well, we actually, you know, in this body, we do things, we pass laws that are intended to prevent crimes from happening if we take those crimes seriously. If we take those crimes seriously. If we actually don't want those crimes to happen, we do things that might prevent those crimes from happening. The folks on this side of the aisle think this is an actual crime that should be taken seriously and prevented. So that's why we're doing this. But the second thing, and we've heard speech after speech after speech, that basically were along the lines of, we shouldn't do this because the Secretary of State doesn't have the tools to prevent this crime. We don't know how to stop this crime. Well, we sure better be thinking about tools on how to stop the crime then. Maybe the Secretary of State doesn't know what documents to use. Maybe the Secretary of State doesn't have the tools to prevent this crime. The concern I have from the other side of the aisle is that what you're saying sounds to me like you're accusing Secretary of State Simon of having lied to Congress a few weeks ago when he was in front of the U.S. Committee on House Administration, April 16th, 2026. You might want to look up the written testimony from that bill. Representative Cagle, when Secretary of State Simon says he knows what citizenship-affirming documents are, I believe him. I'm concerned that the folks on the other side of the aisle don't. Because we're not asking for anybody to have a particular name change document or anything. We're telling Secretary of State Simon that he has to be able to verify the citizenship and eligibility. And if you go read that, again, it's April 16th, 2026. If you just Google Steve Simon, testimony before the U.S. Committee on House Administration, April 16th, 2026, you'll find the written testimony. It's 6 pages. It has 4 different references in there where he's talking about the process that we're supposed to go through in Minnesota, where he references citizenship-affirming documentation. So it's interesting. We can talk all we want about what that citizenship affirming documentation would be or wouldn't be. If we tell Steve Simon to go use that citizenship affirming documentation to verify the citizenship and eligibility of each voter, either he knows what that means or he committed a federal crime a few weeks ago, and I hope the folks on the other side of the aisle aren't accusing him of committing a federal crime. Of course, he wouldn't do that. We heard earlier that calling things crimes means that they don't happen. So he must not have done that, at least according to the logic we heard a little bit earlier. But I think people are left to wonder, if it's so controversial to put into law, the Secretary of State must verify the citizenship and eligibility of each voter whose record is contained in the system. What are people voting no afraid of? What are people voting no on that amendment hoping to achieve? I hope we put up 134 yes votes to show everyone who's thinking about committing that crime that we take it seriously. I'm really, really concerned that some folks in this body are going to send a different message.
I recognize the member from Olmsted, Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Well, I was not going to get involved in this conversation until I heard the statement from Representative Engen and now from Representative Niska, because the premise here This is what Republicans do. Try to make up a problem and then bootstrap that problem to try to stop people from voting. And that is what is happening here. So Democrats are accused of wanting non-citizens to vote. And I have seen this. This is a right-wing media meme thing that Democrats somehow think it's okay or want non-citizens to vote, and that is a lie. That is a lie. And the reality is the incidence of non-citizens voting, I think some of my colleagues have said it here today, it is vanishingly small. But what does the right wing do? The right wing uses the vanishingly small problem to bootstrap solutions that achieve their goals. And what are their goals? Their goals are to stop people from voting, especially people who don't vote for them. And President Trump has admitted this on numerous occasions. And this is what is happening. The right wing perpetuates this lie to justify solutions that will stop people from voting in big or small ways. Everything from claiming there's fraud when there really isn't fraud, which we saw
Representative
President
Nadeau,
Trump
for what
do.
reason do you rise?
Mr. Speaker, I don't know what the rule is, and maybe Mr. Nash can help, but and I love Representative Liebling, but Representative Liebling, please don't generalize that Republicans
Mr. Speaker, is this a point of order
not to
or
vote.
a scold to me?
Mr. Speaker?
Representative Nadeau, if you have a point of order, please state it.
I have a point of order. I would ask the Speaker to ask Representative Liebling to stop disparaging Republicans in general, pretending that we don't want people to vote. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's Mason's 124.
Okay.
Representative Liebling, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Wow, it sure hurts when you get it back, doesn't it? And it wasn't you, Representative, but your colleagues, two of them, just did that to us, and I am responding to their allegation. Because the allegation is that somehow we like fraud, or that we want to allow fraud, or that we like it when non-citizens vote, or some kind of lie like that. And the right wing, maybe you don't listen to right-wing media like so many Republicans do, but that is the lie that gets perpetrated. And it gets perpetrated because they want to put forward solutions and justify solutions that stop people from voting. And President Trump has even said, and why do you think that gerrymandering is now going on all over the country? Because President Trump told Texas, do some gerrymandering so you can elect more Republicans to Congress. And that started a whole chain of other states, Democratic states, trying to hustle to do the same to stop Republican states from having an advantage and having them, Republican legislatures, pick their voters and try to gain advantage that way. This is what is going on all over the country. So this is something, unfortunately, that has been going on for a while, but under Trump it is so much worse. And I'm not saying that you personally are doing this, but this is what the right wing is doing. They're foisting these lies about what's going on in elections in order to justify solutions that stop people from voting, particularly people who would be against Trump, which we know right now the vast majority of the public is against Trump, and Trump knows, he's even said that Democrats will win in the midterms unless something is done to
Mr. Speaker,
stop
what
them
order of
from
business
voting.
are we on? This tirade is giving me a migraine.
Representative Engen, we're on discussion of the
Members,
amendment.
it's so hard to take it, isn't
Liebling,
it,
can
when you
hold
can
on
dish
for
it
just
out
one
so
moment,
well.
Please. We're on Amendment A10. Representative Liebling, you continue to have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, yeah, members, it sure is hard to take it, isn't it? But it sure is easy to lie and suggest or to say outright that Democrats want illegal people or non-citizens to vote. And that is a lie. And I just want to be very clear. That is a lie. We want eligible voters to vote, but we also don't want to discourage people from voting, make it hard for them to vote. Especially, we don't want different categories of people, like, say, married women, to have a harder time voting because they can't get the documents they need. We have a safe and secure and fair system here in Minnesota. The federal government would like very much to reach in and mess it up, but we have a great system here in Minnesota, and we should leave it the way it is and allow Minnesotans to vote. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I support the amendment, and I just wanted to touch on a couple points. It was just said that we have a safe and secure election system. And generally, I honestly agree with that. But what we did, we had a fraud hearing on election fraud this year, or last December, I think. And Secretary Simon was there. And we discussed 2 cases from the summer of 2025, less than a year ago, 2 federal convictions for fake voter registration. 500 to 600 fake voter registrations were done in Minneapolis, and those people were prosecuted and have gone to jail. And that's a good thing. But they were allowed to submit fake voter registrations, and it was caught not at the Secretary of State's office, it was caught by one of the counties. But only one of the 13 counties that got these fake voter registrations actually caught it. And then the Secretary testified that he would not provide the name of the other counties, the other 12 counties that got it. And he claims that those fake voter registrations have been deactivated, but they are not removed from our voter registration files. So this is an actual 2 federal cases of fake voter registrations from last year, and those names may still be in our still in our voter registration files, listed as inactive. So if someone knows who those names are, they could go in and say that they are that person and reactivate the voter file. And you can go watch the hearing. This was all testified to. So members, it is important that we have a number of election reforms, and this is one of them, because we have to be able to prove that people are who they say they are and are indeed eligible to vote. You are not eligible if you are not a citizen, and you are not eligible if you are a made-up person whose name got stuck in our voter registration system. So I encourage members to take this seriously and to support cleaning up our voter registration rolls, because it is important for all of us. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Greenman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I wasn't planning on rising again. But I do need to correct a few things, including what Representative Robbins just said, because I think it's actually proof, 1, the issue she raised would not be impacted by this bill, and 2, it is a good example in our committee about the checks and law we currently have, which is it was an issue of for money, people breaking the law, and having a list of voters who, of people who didn't exist. Counties caught it. They reported it to both the Secretary of State and to the feds. They prosecuted it. People went to jail. Nobody was registered. Nobody voted. And that's just the facts that we heard from Bill Gaughan, who repeated what happened in that courtroom. And the other thing I just have to push back on is Representative Niska. I did say it's a crime, it's a felony, it's a deportable offense. And I also said, that it has worked. And what you didn't repeat is that 77 cases nationally between 1999 and 2023, over 1 billion ballots, is not a problem. And I think that what many of my colleagues were responding to, what I'm responding to now, is when you twist and turn and try to manufacture mistrust and problems that don't exist. 1, you are manufacturing against eligible Minnesotans who are just trying to vote and exercising their democracy. And 2, you are through your language, through your misrepresentation, and in some cases through your lies, eroding trust and creating problems for our elections administrators and the neighbors who are administrating the ballot. It is a problem, and so when we are here, come correct, use your facts, but don't do this thing which we heard done, which is use good examples of the law working to try to undermine and pass a law that will hurt many people and won't even impact what you wanted to do. Members, again, this is an easy vote no.
I recognize the member from Olmsted, Representative Quam.
Thank you, and this is quick. The reference that was made, the law is working, that was the feds, not the state that did that catch, did the convictions.
I recognize the author of the amendment, the member from Goodhue, Representative Altendorf.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, members. Let us just reground ourselves here for just a tiny bit. And that is that this amendment does not change the registration. Let me repeat that. It does not change the voter registration. And if you have questions as you tried to ask us and to try to dilute the conversation and mislead the public to what this amendment does, if you have questions, then those questions should be directed at Steve Simon, at the Secretary of State, because that is his responsibility, that is his job as a constitutional officer of the state, and by gosh, he already says that he does it. He is telling us that he already verifies the vote. So all of this, members, was complete nonsense, talking about the registration of our voters. And it is disappointing to see the Democrat Party try to call us racist. Try to say that we are trying to disenfranchise minorities from voting when that could not be further from the truth. It is disappointing to see them say that we are sexist, that we are trying to keep women from voting, and to be noted, one of the Democrat members just said, I am. What else am I? Transphobic? No. You know what? I will stand here and I will take the slings and the arrows thrown at me for voter integrity in Minnesota. This could not be a more simple amendment. This is asking the Secretary of State to verify the vote. And members, that is not too much to ask. We should have a means to verify the vote, which currently we do not, because the Secretary of State continually denies us as public officials to see the voter rolls, to verify our voter rolls. As many of you know, I have the Hennepin County voter rolls. The reason why we need to have a verification method is because of the laws that the Democrats passed in 2023. Driver's license for all. There's no marking on these licenses if you're a non-citizen, even though the Republicans offered those amendments. California has a marking that says right on their license that it is not for voting purposes. The Minnesota Democrats refused. So members, when we're talking about verifying the voter rolls, it is actually to protect non-citizens so they do not accidentally vote in our elections because of the diluted laws that you have passed in this chamber. The Minnesota Democrats have 16 and 17-year-olds automatically registered to vote. And we are doing this to verify our voter rolls so that people are not accidentally voting. Members, that is not too much to ask, that the Secretary of State verifies that the people on the voter rolls indeed are eligible to vote. And every time you fight against this, you disenfranchise the Minnesota voters. Every time you try to make excuses and say that we're racist and sexist and all of these other things, it is so disenfranchising to the Minnesota citizens who just want to make sure that their vote counts. And Mr. Speaker, I will not ask them to yield, but I would ask any member of the Democrat Party that if the roles were reversed and there was a Republican governor, Republican Secretary of State, that would you not want a means to verify that the voter rolls have been clean? Members, this is not too much to ask. And since we have decided to make this such a huge topic, which I honestly did not think we were going to go down any of these roads, yes, there is problems in the Minnesota elections, and yes, they have been well documented, and they are becoming more and more common. As some of them were mentioned, hundreds of voters illegally registered, and it was Ronnie Williams and Lorraine Combs, you can look it up, pleaded guilty, June 2025. Just a month or two ago, March of 2026, there is a grand jury subpoena to Steve Simon for 125 people on our voter rolls that are potentially non-citizens. That seems problematic to me, members. That seems like a red flag to me that we should possibly look at that. More convictions of, just recently, a non-citizen voted in the 2024 election. And again, was it a mistake? Because you refuse to put on their driver's license that it's not for the purposes of voting? Possibly. Are we putting non-citizens in a position to possibly get a felony because they don't understand that they're not supposed to be voting? Possibly. I will stand up here all day long and protect the Minnesota citizens. Over 70% of them who want voter ID. You say we have, let me quote again, Representative Lee, fair, accurate, honest, secure elections. But just believe us, we're not going to show you. Members, this is absolutely ridiculous. And it's condescending. It is belittling for you to sit over there and to say that we're racist and sexist and transphobes just because we want to verify the vote. You can't say we have the best election system in the whole country and no one can verify it. On the Hennepin County voter rolls, there's literally 2,992 voters who have missing data. Missing data. Missing an address, missing a birth date, missing a social security number. Seems problematic, doesn't it? 2,992. And yet you say, oh, that's not a problem. That's enough to swing elections. That's enough to swing a city council race. On the Hennepin County voter rolls, there's 16 people that do not have a birth date. Seems problematic. How about the election in Shakopee that was won by 14 votes? So members, let me make this perfectly clear. As much as you wanted to dilute this conversation and make it into something it absolutely was not, to make it seem like we're trying to make it harder for people of minorities, for women to vote, you try to make this into a conversation it's not. This does not change the voter registration. Read the amendment. It simply asks the Secretary of State to file with the Minnesota State Legislature proof that they have validated the voter rolls. Members, validate the vote. It's not too much to ask.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. The clerk will call the names of the members voting remotely.
Allen.
You're up.
Allen votes aye.
Allen votes aye. Burkle.
Burkle, go.
Burkle votes aye.
Burkle votes aye. Franzen.
Here you go.
Franzen votes yes.
Franzen votes aye. Kozlowski.
Go ahead, vote no.
Kozlowski votes no.
Kozlowski votes no. McDonald.
McDonald aye.
Say it again.
McDonald aye.
McDonald votes aye. Momani Hiltzley.
Momani Hiltzley, no.
Momani Hiltzley votes no. Wolgamott.
Wolgamott, no.
Wolgamott votes no.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 67 yeas and 67 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The chief clerk will report the amendment.
Quam moves to amend House File Number 4240, the first engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A11.
I recognize a member from Olmsted, Representative Quam.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. This is just to require the full removal of deceased people from the voters' rolls. And if before you ask, well, nobody deceased is voting, the federal system at SSA has checked registrations and has flagged deceased people registering in the state of Minnesota. It's not a huge thing, but let's take care of it by cleaning up the roll. Oregon is doing it and other states are doing it, so it's not an unusual thing to do. Let's just vote green.
I recognize a member from Hennepin, Representative Coulter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Quam, and I mean that sincerely. Thank you for bringing this amendment, because this is, firstly, because this is a really good opportunity to talk about how our voter registration process is thoughtful and why we do things the way we do them. But secondly, because it also reminded me of one of my all-time favorite lines from one of my favorite TV shows. As Bart and Lisa Simpson are slowly discovering that Sideshow Bob is rigging the mayoral election by using dead people to vote, Bart Simpson gets this horrified look on his face and said, "Oh my God, the dead have risen and they're voting Republican." And it's actually, that's a somewhat appropriate quote, because it leads me into an excellent example about how the current system that we have already catches people. And if you don't believe me, you can ask Danielle Miller of Nashwauk. Ms. Miller was charged with 3 felonies for casting her deceased mother's absentee ballot because her mother really, really wanted to vote for Donald Trump. And, you know, I hope that one extra vote in a state that Donald Trump lost by 138,000 was worth those 3 felony charges. But the reason that this is important, and the reason that it's important that we use the process that we have now, is that for election judges and for the public, there really is no distinction. When a voter is deceased, when they die, they are marked as inactive in our system currently. But the record stays within SVRS, but the record is not accessible to election judges or to the public. And the reason that that matters is that when someone tries to register or vote, as Ms. Miller did, it raises a flag in the system. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to request a roll call vote.
There being 15 hands, there will be a roll call.
Thank you. And if this amendment becomes law, that's another backstop. That's another way of catching folks that is taken away. So this amendment actually removes an opportunity to catch folks who are trying to commit the very fraud that you're trying to prevent. So I'm going to ask folks to vote no.
Any further discussion? I recognize the author of the amendment, the representative from Olmsted, Representative Quam.
Thank you. You know, frankly, to me, it doesn't matter who the fraudsters are voting for. The fraudsters should not be able to vote. And not all counties are taking and preventing people from voting that are challenged, have been flagged, because an audit done by the legislative auditor did a sampling which indicated there are counties that are just letting them come in, say, yes, I can vote, even though they're flagged that they can't, and they vote. So let's just clean up the system, because there's more verification when somebody's trying to register than, you know, obviously we're sending out to dead people absentee ballots. So that system should be changed and fixed. Let's clean it up. If Oregon can do it, it's obviously not biased towards one party. Vote green.
There being no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. The clerk will call the names of the members voting remotely.
Allen.
Allen votes aye.
Allen votes aye. Burkle.
Burkle, go ahead.
Burkle votes aye.
Burkle votes aye. Franzen.
Franson votes yes.
Franzen votes aye. Kozlowski.
Kozlowski votes no.
Kozlowski votes no. McDonald.
Here you are, Joe.
McDonald
Joe.
aye.
Hold on.
McDonald.
McDonald. McDonald.
McDonald aye.
Say it again.
McDonald aye.
McDonald votes aye. Momani Hiltsley. Momani Hiltsley.
Momani Hiltsley, no.
Momani Hiltsley votes no. Wolgamott.
Wolgamott votes no.
Wolgamott votes no.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 67 yeas and 67 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The chief clerk will report the amendment.
Davis moves to amend House File Number 4240, the first engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A12.
I recognize the member from Crow Wing, Representative Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a good meet-in-the-middle amendment here. Minnesota stands out as only one of 3 states that does not have provisional ballots. This amendment brings common sense to our same-day voter registration. Again, same-day voter registration. And it still, the cool thing about it is it still protects the vote. Like the vote still gets counted. It will help ensure that only eligible voters are counted. And it still preserves Minnesota's long-standing tradition of election day registration. Under current law, a person can register to vote on election day without a driver's license, without a social security number, and without any form of identity verification. And their ballot is immediately mixed in and counted with really no way of clawing it back. This amendment closes that gap
without shutting the door on anyone who is truly eligible. This amendment brings just a little bit of security to our sacred election process. And that is exactly what the people of this great state want. Even CNN did a poll in regards to this. Now, that was in regards to voter ID, not provisional balloting, but it proves the point that America, they want to make sure that this process is secure. That's what it's about. I think CNN's poll showed like altogether like 70 to 75% of voters want this or wanted that. So here's what the amendment does. I'll try to read faster. First, it creates a new provisional ballot process for election day registration. The voter fills out a registration application on a provisional ballot signature envelope, swears under oath that they are eligible, and casts their ballot in a separate provisional envelope and ballot box. These ballots are kept completely separate at the polling place, but again, still counted. After Election Day, the county auditor or municipal clerk verifies the registration. If it checks out, the ballot is counted. If not, the voter receives a written notice explaining exactly why, and there would be a very good reason why it wasn't counted. Second, the same logic applies to early voting. If someone shows up to vote early and isn't registered or needs to update their registration, they go through the Election Day registration process and receive a provisional ballot instead of a regular early ballot. Next, for absentee voting, the amendment requires voters who are not already registered to include a completed voter registration application with their absentee materials. County officials will process that registration first before the ballot board reviews the absentee ballot envelope. Next, because provisional ballots need to be reviewed after Election Day, the amendment reasonably extends canvassing deadlines. For example, county canvassing boards after a state general election would meet between the 10th and the 17th day instead of the 3rd and the 10th, giving them time to do their job right. And I'll just remind us that, official results, the certification process of our election happens usually 2 to 3 weeks after the results that come out on election night, okay? It also updates electronic roster requirements so e-poll books can properly handle provisional ballot envelopes, requires paper backup systems, and directs the Secretary of State to run a public awareness campaign encouraging Minnesotans to register before Election Day. That's just responsible. But yet they can still do it on voter day, on Election Day. So, Mr. Speaker, this is a straightforward good government reform bill, our amendment. It protects the integrity of our elections by adding a simple verification step for same-day registrants, while still allowing every eligible voter the chance to have their ballot counted. It brings Minnesota in line with the overwhelming majority of states that have successfully used provisional ballots for years. We're not reinventing the wheel here, folks. I urge the House to support this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I recognize a member from Hennepin, Representative Greenman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'm not sure if Representative Davis was going to ask for a roll call, but if he doesn't want one, I do.
There will be a roll call, Representative Greenman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And this provisional balloting bill has been, unlike the bills we've seen in the amendments we've talked about in the past, this proposal has been around for a while. The reason that provisional balloting became a thing was because it was required of states who didn't have same-day voter registration. And Minnesota has been a proud state that has had same-day registration since 1974. And since 1974, it is one of the reasons that we have the highest voter turnout and participation in the state of in the country. And I think it's something that we can all be proud of. What this does is functionally eliminate same-day registration by creating a maybe pile on Election Day where in order for your vote to be counted, you have to come back, which for many people is insurmountable. And the reason we know this is because states that have this, some of them as many as a third to a half of provisional ballots are not counted. But that's actually not my question for Representative Davis. I'm wondering if Representative Davis will yield for a question.
He will yield. Representative Greenman.
Thank you, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Davis, I'm wondering if you know how much this will cost the state if we pass this bill or this
Representative
amendment.
Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The state can absorb any cost to them, and the county elections departments are already doing much of verification work, so it's not going to take much more for them to also verify these absentee. I mean, you yourself know that the county has a lot of work to do after the election, and they have plenty of volunteers to help them. So the cost would be very minimal, easy for the state to absorb. Same with the counties. Thank you.
Representative Greenman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, you apparently didn't look at the fiscal note that was done for this bill, and it was 2021, which we have had inflation since then. In 2021, a version of this bill was in the Senate, and it says it was total, in the first biennium, it was almost $1 million. The second biennium, it was a little bit less. It was $680,000. But that, and you answered my second question, or speculated on my second question, so I will not ask it, but I will read you on the fiscal note, because my bigger concern is what it would cost the cities and counties that administer our elections. Because as it feels like we need to clear up, it's not the Secretary of State that administers our elections, it's our local cities and counties. They are the ones who register voters, they are the ones who put them in the SVRS, they are the ones who administer, and in this case, would be the ones responsible for having a maybe pile and processing them. And what the fiscal note from 2021 says was, it's sort of some estimates, but this suggests statewide implementation would cost several $1 million at the municipal level, that's cities, before even considering county costs where most of our elections are administered. And the thing that troubles me is that this is, again, another policy where we see a solution in search of a problem, and this one will raise people's property taxes. This one will mean $1 million less out of the state general fund for roads and bridges and all of the other things we want to do. But the real costs are borne at the local level. And that's the case with all the work we do in the election space. We very proudly, in a bipartisan way, passed a voter fund, the vote fund, I believe we called it, which was the first time in the history of the state where we provide state funding ongoing for counties and cities. Not much, probably less than would be needed for this bill. And so when I think about where we should put our precious state and local dollars, it is not solving a solution in search of a problem. The last thing I will say, and I just, to say on all of these policies that we keep seeing, you know, they put barriers and hurdles in front of Minnesotans. They use things that are not problems, and as I cited in the last case, even the right wing, even the Trump administration, way back to the Bush administration, when we have spent hundreds of millions of federal and state dollars looking for voter fraud, they have not found it. But what we have found is policies that create barriers and make it harder for our elections administrators to do their job. And I think the reason we're seeing this now is because we have a president who has determined that he can't go and his party can't go in front of voters. Voters have soured on the Trump agenda. Voters are not going to be with them, and we've seen this in election after election, special election after election, skyrocketing gas prices, war in Iran, rampant chaos and corruption. And I know I've said this once before, but to belabor the point, and the president, and this is why people, I think, outside this dome are so concerned, the president has been saying these things out loud. On January 14th, he said You know, it's some deep psychological thing, but when you win the presidency, you don't win the midterms. Then he boasted that he had accomplished so much. When you think about it, we shouldn't even have an election. That's what the President of the United States said. So you have to understand that when the public and what we are responding to in the public is worried about changing our election laws less than 5 months before this midterm election, we have to both be careful and we have to be concerned. And I understand and have seen what Trump is doing. He's been doing this all along. January 6th was a response to losing an election, and he tried to commit voter fraud. He tried to get 11,780 votes in Georgia. He tried fake electors, and when that didn't work, he sent people to storm the Capitol. But what I can't understand, after what we've seen in the last year, executive order after executive order of illegal, unconstitutional attempts to federalize our elections, to interfere with the vote, is why my House Republican colleagues would do his bidding. Because I actually believe, I have been with some of you in your districts, I believe you deeply care about your voters. I heard Leader Niska say the voice of people, our whole system works. The voice of the people can be reflected here in the laws we make. And the voices are cheapened, and he was talking in that case when people can't run for office because they feel afraid. But here we're talking about people potentially not being able to vote because of barriers that we have put in place that are not actually responding to a problem, but certainly are getting in the way of people's fundamental right to vote. And so what I would ask all of us is our job is not the people of another state, like I heard Representative Altendorf said, we need to make sure that we're protecting other people's votes. Our job is our Minnesota voters, that every eligible Minnesotan, every citizen who is eligible to vote can cast their ballot. And right now, we have a system where voters, elections administrators, and participation itself has shown we have a good system that we've been building on for a while, and we shouldn't change it 5 months before the election because President Trump and his MAGA party don't think that they can win without changing who's voting. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I recognize the member from Olmsted, Representative Quam.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let's drop the, federal politics, etc. It's around 96% of all people that live in the United States are not denied a ballot when they go to vote because they have provisional ballots, which guarantee everyone that shows up, even if they don't have the documentation, gets to vote in those states. Minnesota is one of 3 states that do not abide by the Help America Vote Act. They were specifically given an exemption from having to provide everybody a ballot. If there was a question about the person, they didn't have the documentation, etc., they still got to vote, but their ballot was a provisional ballot. In Minnesota, we allow registering and running that ballot through the tabulator multiple days. And frankly, if you look at the data on the HAVA SSA site, thousands of people that registered and voted came up as bad registrations and the federal site. So that means people that should not have had a vote tabulated had it tabulated. Now, I don't know who they voted, but hundreds is a problem, thousands is worse, and looking at multiple election cycles, I've reviewed that data, looking at the times at which they registered and it was run through the system, that's problematic. So the cost, oh, it's going to cost so much, it's so hard to implement. The vast majority of cities and elections have this. Are we not capable of doing what most states do? Again, we're one of three. We're the largest population of the three. So the vast majority, they don't have a problem being able to run this. They've been doing it for decades. They don't have a huge, dwarfing cost that won't let people, they can't afford to run a system. No. They've been doing it. So the only thing this does is guarantee a person gets a ballot if they are registering and they don't have the information. And that would be a logical thing to do, just like just about every state in this nation. The vast majority of the populace go through, and they can do it. It's long past time that Minnesota should. Vote green.
I recognize a member from Hennepin, Representative Freiberg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Greenman already ably covered the effect this would have on same-day registration as well as the cost, so I just wanted to respond to a couple points that have been raised. First of all, we are compliant with the Help America Vote Act because HAVA has a waiver process and we have a waiver. Regarding what happens in other states, voters aren't denied a ballot, but there's no guarantee their ballot will ultimately be counted. Provisional balloting disproportionately affects voters with disabilities. These voters may now be asked to overcome physical, communication, and transportation barriers a second time to appear at the county office after the election. Voters whose ballot is in the maybe pile are unlikely to make this trip into the county offices after the election because the unofficial election totals will already have been announced. Minnesota has a variety of rigorous safety measures in place before, on, and after Election Day to ensure our elections are fair and secure. This includes everything from requiring each voter to swear under penalty of perjury that they are eligible to vote and acknowledging that it is a felony to falsify information on the registration, to a centralized voter registration database that goes through a continuous and rigorous maintenance, verification, and data matching process, to processes conducted by election judges from different political parties at each polling place, among other safety measures. Please vote no on this amendment.
Any further discussion? I recognize the author of the amendment, the member from Crow Wing, Representative Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I will go back to a conversation that I had with a county elections supervisor. Representative Davis, if cheating is happening in our elections, it's happening with same-day voter registration. That was from an elections supervisor. And again, there's been some misinformation on this House floor. The ballots still get counted. They still get certified. That doesn't change. And as far as the cost goes, pretty minor number statewide compared to $18 billion surplus we had not long ago. I want to read you a quote. The integrity of our elections remains under serious threat. Oh, you don't like that quote, do you? I'm about to tell you who said that just a few years ago. A sitting U.S. senator, I will quote it again, the integrity of our elections remains under serious threat. Senator Amy Klobuchar. Look it up. Senator Amy Klobuchar. The integrity of our elections remains under serious threat. Yeah, please look it up. So, provisional ballots again, and no, I won't. I have a series of questions in my head I would like to ask, but for time's sake, Mr. Speaker, we're going to move on. Please vote green on this common sense amendment that brings security. And again, I'll remind the body, most Americans want to make sure that our elections are secure. Provisional ballots doesn't hinder anyone from voting, nor disenfranchising anyone from voting. Please vote green on this common sense amendment.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. Members, please vote. The clerk will call the names of the members voting remotely.
Allen.
Allen votes aye.
Allen votes aye. Burkle.
Burkle, go ahead.
Burkle votes aye.
Burkle votes aye. Franzen.
Okay.
Here you go. Franzen.
Franzen.
Branson votes aye.
Franzen votes aye. Kozlowski.
Kozlowski votes no.
Kozlowski votes no. McDonald. McDonald.
McDonald, go ahead.
McDonald, aye.
McDonald votes aye. Momani Hiltzley.
Momani Hiltzley votes no.
Momani Hiltzley votes no. Walgamont.
Wolgamott, no.
Walgamont votes no.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 67 yeas and 67 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The chief clerk will report the amendment.
Engen moves to amend House File Number 4240, the first and Grossman as amended. The amendment is coded A3.
I recognize a member from Anoka, Representative Engen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment's really simple. It shouldn't take that much time because there's a spirit of bipartisanship that's already been established to it. Last year, we passed this as a single subject bill off of the House floor by a vote count of 131 to 2. Pretty overwhelmingly bipartisan. Now, what does the amendment do? It establishes that us as legislators can't then appropriate money to a nonprofit and then have that nonprofit spend directly or indirectly to influence the makeup of this very body in our elections. But that's exactly what they're doing right now. With over $2.2 billion in nonprofit spending last biennium, $1.3 billion of that being directly to an earmarked nonprofit, we should not be the ones benefiting from, in an electoral sense, on ads that either are for us or against our opponent from those Minnesota tax dollars that are going towards a nonprofit for a specific purpose, and one of those purposes is not in our elections. So I'll digest some discussion on this before seeing if I want to place on a roll call, but appreciate the opportunity.
Discussion.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
State your point of order.
Under 3.21, motions must be germane, and this is an amendment to Chapter 211B, which is not in the underlying bill. That raises the new topic of fair campaign practices, also introduces the new subject of campaign expenditures into the underlying bill, which is not there to begin with. Not all election amendments are germane to all election bills, and nothing in this bill deals with campaign finance, campaign expenditures, or fair campaign practices under Chapter 211B.
Mr. Speaker, advice?
Advice. State your advice.
This is an elections bill, isn't it, Mr. Speaker? And this has to do with elections and elections-related spending, which falls under the purview of the Elections Committee, which is why it only had to pass through one committee before being sent to the General Register last term. I would hope that you find my advice well taken, seeing as we've already set it as precedent.
Further advice. Recognize a member from Hennepin, Representative Freiberg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I offer advice. The underlying bill makes changes to voting systems, like setting up the reimbursement system for special elections. It doesn't regulate the act of voting or campaign finance, and that distinction is relevant to all manner of bills before the Elections Committee. It's why we've heard bills related to campaign finance and election procedures separately. This amendment might be germane to a bill related to campaign finance, but this is a voting systems bill, and I'd encourage the Speaker to find the point of order well taken.
Any further advice? Well, members, I've studied the amendment, I reviewed the bill, I've considered your advice, I've considered the rules of the House, and I'm ruling that the point of order is well taken.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to overturn the ruling of the Speaker, and I'd request a roll call.
Are there hands for the roll call? Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Discussion. Representative Long.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm appreciating your honesty in your rulings today, and would urge members to find the ruling of the Speaker correct. As Chair Freiberg pointed out, this bill is narrowly tailored to election systems. It does not include campaign finance, and just because it is an amendment that is coming from the Elections Committee doesn't mean that it is germane to the bill.
I recognize the member from Anoka, Representative Ingen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And to that point, Representative Long, there was an A8 amendment that was offered by Representative Heinzman that dealt with the exact same chapter of law that was not ruled out of order. So seeing as past precedent, not only last session when this was passed out of an elections omnibus bill, very similar in this sense to this elections bill, but also the fact that we just set that precedent, same precedent 34 minutes ago when this was offered, I would hope that members find this ruling by the Speaker as not well taken.
All right, members, I'm going to remind you yet again today that the question before the body is, shall the decision of the Speaker stand as the judgment of the House? A yes or a green vote supports the ruling of the Speaker. A no or a red vote goes against the ruling of the Speaker. The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will call the names of the members voting remotely.
Allen.
Okay, there's a lot of green up there and some red.
Allen.
Say it. I went green.
Allen votes aye.
Allen votes aye. Burkle.
Burkle, go ahead.
Burkle votes aye.
Burkle votes aye. Franzen.
Here we go.
Franzen.
Franzen. Franzen.
Branson votes yes.
Franzen votes aye. Kozlowski.
Kozlowski votes aye.
Kozlowski votes aye. McDonald.
Go, Joe.
McDonald aye.
McDonald votes aye. Momani Hiltzley.
Momani Hiltzley, aye.
Momani Hiltzley votes aye. Wogamont.
Wogamont aye.
Wogamont votes aye.
Recall Allen.
I'll tell you, I will.
Allen.
Okay.
Allen changes his vote to nay.
Allen changes from aye to no.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 91 yeas and 42 nays, it is the judgment of the House that the decision of the Speaker shall stand. There are no further amendments at the desk. The Chief Clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File Number 4240, as amended.
Third reading. Discussion. I recognize the author of the bill, the member from Hennepin, Representative Freiberg.
Good bill, vote green.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. The chief clerk will call the names of the members voting remotely.
Allen.
Allen votes yes.
Allen votes aye. Burkle.
Burkle, go.
Burkle votes aye.
Burkle votes aye. Franzen.
Go.
Branson votes yes.
Franzen votes aye. Kozlowski.
Kozlowski votes aye.
Kozlowski votes aye. McDonald.
McDonald.
McDonald, aye.
McDonald votes aye. Momani Hiltzley.
Momani Hiltzley, aye.
Momani Hiltzley votes aye. Wolgamott.
Wolgamott, aye.
Wolgamott votes aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 119 yeas and 15 nays, the bill is passed as amended and its title agreed to.